Welcome to the lecture on ethics and public speaking. Ethics are an integral and central part of the public speaking process. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that deals with issues of right or wrong in human affairs. Because public speaking is essentially human communication, ethics is important to consider. Ethical issues occur when we ask whether an action is moral, immoral, just, or unjust, etc. And ethics come into play when a speaker faces an audience. There are issues of power and influence, and so there are ethics at every stage of the speech-making process. The topic you choose, how you choose to frame that topic, the type of research you do, the type of research you choose to put in your speech, the images that you show, how they're centered around your argument, etc. Quintilian, a Roman philosopher and rhetorician, tells us that the ideal speech is the good person speaking well. And that's something to keep in mind when you're creating your speech. Make sure that you're a good person speaking well and you're thinking about the choices that you're making in the speech-making process. There are a few guidelines for public speakers that we would like for you to practice in this class. The first is that a speaker's goals should be ethically sound. While you might be engaging in information sharing or persuasion in this class, it should always be from a point of ethical and sound research and argumentation, and never one from manipulation or coercion. The second guideline is for you to be prepared. If you adopt an audience-centered approach to public speaking, which we do in this class, not being prepared is an affront to your audience members and really disrespects their time. So an ethical speaker should be prepared and ready to go on the day of their speech. The third guideline for public speakers is to be honest. Never distort information or never take information out of context. The fourth guideline is to avoid name-calling and abusive language. That has really no place in civil discourse. And finally, put these ethical principles into practice, not just when it's convenient, but in everything you do when you're preparing for the speech-making process in this class. Plagiarism is the most serious and most common ethical offense that we see in the public speaking classroom. Plagiarism is simply presenting another's ideas as your own, and it's considered a serious offense in this class. What I need you to know, however, is that there are three types of plagiarism. The first is global. That's when you take an entire speech and you pass it off as your own, and I think most people understand that that is unethical. The second type of plagiarism is patchwork plagiarism, and that's when you patch a speech together by taking pieces of a speech verbatim from 2 to 3 sources. Now, some of you may have learned that that's an appropriate way to do research, but you don't patch sources together verbatim and create a speech. That is still considered plagiarism. The third type of plagiarism is incremental plagiarism, and that's when you fail to give credit to parts of the speech that come from somewhere else. Most times, incremental plagiarism is not intended and it's not malicious, but it's easy to do if you're not careful. You can avoid plagiarism by starting work early. Leave yourself enough time to really develop the speech the way it needs to be done. You can also avoid plagiarism by consulting a variety of sources. And finally, be careful when taking notes. Make sure that you write down the source, the year, and the author, so that when you go back in to create your speech, you can give credit where credit is due. While it is important for the public speakers in this class to make sound, ethical decisions, it's also important to note that the listeners in this class have ethical obligations as well. And as a matter of fact, these ethical obligations for the listener can extend to all of your classroom situations. The first ethical obligation that a listener has is to be courteous and attentive. You're engaging in a contract, if you will, with your speaker that you're going to share time together, and so you need to be as receptive as you possibly can. The second obligation that you have as a listener is to avoid prejudging the speaker. A lot of times we judge a book by its cover. Let's try to avoid doing that when we're in a listening situation. Avoid prejudging the topic. Finally, maintain free and open expression of ideas. Even if you disagree with an idea or you don't like a speech topic, listen to it, open your mind, use critical thinking when you're making your judgments. But don't tune out the speaker just because you don't like their idea or a direction in which they're going. So all in all, listeners do have ethical obligations, and I want you to keep these in mind, not only in this class, but in other classes as well. You have just completed the lecture on ethics and public speaking. Don't forget to take the online quiz that accompanies this lecture. You can find it on my.wartburg under coursework.